And we're live. Welcome to this nameless, as of yet, podcast, because Dave is on vacation, so we have hijacked his new setup to have some fun. So hope this is a good one for you guys. Our guest today is someone that I would say I know reasonably well, being as she's my wife, which is kind of helpful. But Naomi Sheppard is here with us. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
With the intention of sharing a bit of a story that she is going to give us about what's happened to her over the last couple of years and what she's been to, which I think is hopefully going to inspire and be informative for a lot of people. Now, we have done 2 Table Talks episodes previously, but they were a couple of years ago now. So if you don't mind just walking us through maybe some of your accomplishments within the sport of powerlifting so that we kind of get a grasp for who you are and what you've done, how long you've been in it, and then we can start delving into the background and where you eventually ended up.
Okay, I'll try and keep it short. But so I've been competing for about 10 years now. There's like a couple of gaps where I took a bit of time out. But probably most notably I'm known for is in 2022, I won the first Ghost Clash competition. And at that competition, I squatted the all-time world record in the 67.5 kilo class for raw with wraps, where I squatted 578 pounds at 148. That also put me at like 20th in the world of all powerlifters, which is obviously like a huge achievement. The year prior to that, I'd placed myself as the best powerlifter of all time in the UK, which obviously a huge accomplishment for me. That stood for about 3 years. It's been chipped now by a couple of points, but yeah, I was like at the peak of my performance in 2022. I did the Ghost Clash and the American Pro. I came 4th at the American Pro that year. And then I had to take some time out after that just due to a back injury. So which
we'll get into. But yeah. your performance at that American Pro was compromised,
yes,
should we say.
Yeah.
So leading up to that Ghost Clash, you'd been competing for how many years at that point?
7.
years.
But I've been lifting for a lot longer. I didn't start competing straight away. So I started kind of training the powerlifts when I was 18, 19, and I didn't compete until I was 23.
Sure. So what made you take that first step into the gym and put a bar on your back or in your hands?
Yeah, so when I was a teenager, I had something called Sever's disease, which is where I basically ended up with broken heel bones over and over. They would heal, they would break again. From like the age of 11 to 16, I basically didn't do any exercise sport because I spent most of my time with my legs in plaster. So by the time I got to 18, I'd stopped growing, so it wasn't a problem anymore, but I knew that like I could have problems with bone density, especially later in life, more so than the average person. So I kind of picked up weightlifting powerlifting, because I'd read about how great it was if you load the bone end to end, that you can improve the bone density. So I kind of picked up the powerlifts purely from like a health and longevity point of view, but then I kind of just really fell in love with it and realized that it was actually something I was naturally really good at. I think because of my body proportions, and I'm short, I have short limbs, so I picked it up and I was just like making progress so fast. Obviously when you love something, you want to push it even harder. So
do you think a big part of that though was maybe finally finding a physical endeavor that you could do? Because obviously like most teenagers, 11, 16, 17, are trying sports, playing around, whatever, some maybe getting to a high level or just doing it for fun. You were pretty much deprived of that by being in plaster for all that time. So now it was just like, oh, I can use my body for something. And that was where you decided to go with it, yeah?
Yeah, I think like something I don't have in common with a lot of the other top powerlifters is that they pushed sports in other aspects at a much earlier age. I didn't have that because I wasn't able to. So but like it didn't really stop me, like, but yeah, it was like a good output for me, and I'd kind of missed out so much. Like I did try a couple of sports at university. I played rugby for a while, but I wasn't like great at anything, so I'd missed out on that like essential time when you really learn and like the skills. And so powerlifting was something that I picked up on my own. It was easy to learn on my own. Obviously, like we met after I'd been doing it for a year, and then it was like something we had in common. So it was like, you know, I could push it even more. But yeah, like for sure, it's.
Do you think that's one of the biggest benefits of powerlifting for people though, is that, you know, with all due respect to other sports, the entry requirements are quite low? Like most people can have access to an empty bar and a squat rack and a power rack. Most people can squat, deadlift, or bench with some tuition. But as if there's someone like you who wants to jump into rugby and they've never been exposed to it, right?
It's a lot more complicated.
Yeah, you've got so much to, and if everyone else has been playing it, as a team sport for a decade at that point, what option do you have other than sit on the bench?
Yeah.
Whereas you've got this endeavor now where the entry level is, can you squat the bar? And it goes at whatever pace you wanted it to. And I bet that was a really nice feeling to just have now a physical project that your starting point was determined by you.
Yeah.
And your progress was determined by
I think also you're not you're reliant on only yourself, no one else. Like, you don't need other people to do it. So yeah, like it can fit into pretty much any lifestyle.
So how did those first couple of years pan out? Because obviously you reached, and we'll get back to, an extremely high level. A lot of people always kind of imagine it's like hitting the ground running for those individuals. So what did those first 1 or 2 years look like? Would it have been obvious to anyone at that point that you were going to be someone who strided forward and achieved those things? Or was it kind of quite normal for the first year or two?
I mean, when I started lifting in the gym, it was still really uncommon for women to be in the weights room. So like it was a different thing. Like, I would be asked if I was in the wrong place, if I needed help. Like, even at that point, there really wasn't that much, like, even just clothing for women to go and wear to the gym. Like, it was, you were in the cardio room, the weights room is always separate. So I, like, obviously picked it up on my own. We met like a year later, which I think, like, having someone else to help push me was like a really big thing. But like, I knew I was good at it because I made pretty quick progress. Like, when I started out, I did like a lot of research about what other people were lifting, and I'd set myself like lifetime goals of like 100 kilo squats, 225, and like 100 kilo deadlift, and like a 60 kilo bench, just like 135. And I think like within the first like year, I'd basically surpassed those. So I set myself lifetime goals, and then I beat them within like a year. So
what's the thought process then with lifetime goals being done in a year?
Yeah, I mean, I was like, I'm going to have to reevaluate and put up some pretty, much bigger goals. I mean, obviously you make progress much quicker when you're a beginner. I feel like that does slow over time the more you push, and like that 5% more is, the more you get close to reach your ceiling, it's much, much harder to be able to get like another even 1%. So like, you get to a point where it's actually just difficult to maintain that level of strength, let alone make progress.
So you just kind of run into standstill at some point. You got to be okay
eventually,
with that.
Yeah.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying what you're watching, make sure to take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe.
Okay, so lifetime goals have been achieved after a year. Next kind of step then obviously is, when do you first step on the platform? How did you do? And did you know then that like, this is the sport for me? This is what I'm going to be doing for the next decade, or, whatever it ends up being?
Yeah. I mean, before I even competed, I knew that it was something I was going to do forever because I love the training. Obviously I waited a few years before competing just because of like, I was at university, I was graduating, I was starting out in a new job. Like, we moved a couple of times. So there was never really like a time where we were settled until, I'd been training at that point for like 5 years, and we both did our first competition together, which was really special. And I went into it with like zero expectations. I just set my own goals. And I think this is something that I've continued to do. And I've just always been like hyper focused on myself. Like, obviously winning in competition is great, but I just look to improve on what I've done previously. And so I was just like, kind of, this is what I want to achieve myself. And I went into that competition. I won the entire thing. Obviously it was, a small regional competition, but like, I knew then, okay, I'm good at this. Like, this is something. And like, I loved the experience. We met so many great people, of which we've like made lifelong connections in the powerlifting community in the UK. And it all started at like that competition. So yeah, I kind of just got bit by the bug, loved competing, and haven't looked back since. So.
Sure. And what were your lifts in that first competition, if you can remember?
Yeah, I can remember it in kilos. Not
That's
sure
fine.
I can convert it in my head that quick,
good.
but I squatted like 130 kilos.
Like 285, give or take.
Benched 70.
Oh,
and
165.
deadlifted 142.
So 30,
I was
310, 315.
I was in the 148 class
Cool.
at that point. So yeah, like I
Mhm.
think compared to what I'm lifting now,
Sure,
it's
you
like,
gotta start somewhere.
but
though,
like
right?
it was a good, considering it was my first competition. Like I don't think it really matters, you know, you can compete at any point.
Sure.
But yeah, those were my numbers from my first
So
competition.
what did the next couple of years look like? Obviously, there's quite a big gap then between that and, should we say for now, what's been your pinnacle, which would be that Ghost Clash win.
Well, it's
So,
like a 7-year gap. Yeah.
so what kind of highlights are there in between
yeah.
there? What do we work through, and you know how fast does one progress in that window? Because you know people probably have this perception that happens very quickly,
Yeah.
and it's even at your level probably is not what they think it is. So if we can
Yeah.
just have a little bit of a breakdown of some of the bigger competitions that led you to getting invited to the Ghost Clash.
Yeah. So I competed in the WPC network
Mhm.
mostly at the beginning, through the British Powerlifting Union Federation. So like I would do nationals, like I won nationals. I got the biggest score of the entire competition. I moved on to the Europeans. I won that. I've won Worlds, WPC Worlds a couple of times. Again, I got the biggest score of the entire competition.
Mhm.
And then like I went on to like the pro network, starting with the Irish Pro,
Mhm.
which is like the closest competition we had back in the UK. So I did that, and then I was set to do the Kern US Open, which is like the pinnacle of powerlifting. Or in my head, that was something I'd always aimed to do. So I was set to do that in 2020. 2020, yeah, that's the year that then obviously COVID struck and we went into lockdown. So
Sure.
the Kern was postponed to later that year, but the UK had like a travel ban for almost a year. I
Yeah.
think it was like almost a year. So we couldn't even travel to that competition when it happened. So I feel like that year though was quite pivotal because obviously we were both working in a commercial gym. Gym shut for an entire year in the UK. So we were unable to go and do our job. So I just really focused on my training, and we were lucky that we had like a great gym set up in our little outhouse at the bottom of our backyard. It was like small, but like honestly, I've got like the best memories from training there because we just trained. I like really focused on like pushing myself. I had all this time to recover. We transitioned to working a lot more online at that point because we still had to earn an income. And it, you know, ended up putting it in a position where we could travel. And like, I'm thankful, you know, obviously it was like a little bit stressful from a work point of view, but like we figured it out and pivoted and made it work. But from a training point of view, I made huge progress that year. So I wouldn't say it's like, it's not gradual over that 7 years. Like I would progress, stagnate for a little while. And I feel like every time that would happen, I'd have to like step it up another notch. Like I need to be paying some attention to something in a bit more detail, like nutrition, supplementation, like recovery protocols. So by the time it got to 2022, like I was on point with everything. It had become like the center focus of my entire life. So like the importance and my priorities were all set to like achieving and powerlifting. So
just to back that there a little bit, so I can add some context here as well. That shed was maybe 3 meters by 3 meters
I
or
mean, it
whatever,
was
right?
tiny.
So 10, 11 feet, maybe by 10, 11 feet square.
Yeah.
It was full of equipment that was 20, 30 years old. When I say full, 2 half racks, 2 power bars,
We had a cable stack.
cable stack, and like a really thin, rickety bench. But that was probably your best consistent training progress at maybe any point in your career. Would that be fair to say?
Well, I guess all the life stresses were taken away. Like you couldn't do anything.
Sure.
Like I don't know what a lockdown was like in the US, but it was so strict in the UK that you weren't allowed to see anybody for like months at a time. Like we even had a rule at one point where you could only leave your house once a day. You couldn't go to the supermarket with anyone else. You would go and only a certain number of people would be allowed in at a time. So like the rules were so strict that like there was literally nothing else going on in my life. So I think it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's, you know, in that scenario, like I remember you walking out squats, and if you didn't do it perfect, the bar would be scraping on the wall because it was so tight to the wall. You couldn't get plates on the bar. You had to like kind of like wiggle around. Well, all I'm saying is you had, you know, very little equipment on a creaky floor in a wooden shed, and yet you made the most of it. And it just kind of goes to show that if you really want it, you can probably make do and make progress with very little, especially if that gave you the opportunity to get everything dialed in.
Yeah.
So do you think that during that period, because all those other things dropped away, you had an opportunity that you'd never had before to look at what do I do to dial in further? Like you actually had the time to think and free time to be like, what can I put in my day that I don't normally get to do because of my regular job to make me better? And then do you think that actually kind of showed you the path you needed to be on to get to the top?
I think so. Like it definitely was like a pivotal point for me. And it also made me realize like how important it was to me and like how successful I could be if I really pushed it. So, yeah.
Cool. So we come out of lockdown, COVID, whatever, and you emerge from this cocoon of 1 or 2 years of training in this little shed where no one knows what you're doing. What is the first competition that you do after that point?
So travel was still super restricted, but I really wanted to get back on the platform. So I just did like a local regional competition. It had been a while since I'd done one, but I did it with the federation that I'd started with. So it was very like familiar for me. But yeah, I went into that competition with like the goal of I want to be #1 in the UK. So that's what I achieved at that competition. And then the one after that was the Irish Pro. So that was like my first step back on pro platform. And I won that competition. And it was just like a great experience. And then off the back of that, I got invited to like much bigger competitions. Like my goal was to always compete in the US because the competition's just much steeper. Like my goal is to always put myself in a position where I'm like the small fish in a big pond. I don't want to be the best. I want to learn from others who are doing it better than me. So like my goal is to like, obviously I love to win, but like I will always put myself in a difficult position to do that because I feel like that challenge, you know, you have to work so much harder, but also there's an opportunity to learn from other people that are better than you. So like I'll go to big competitions and I watch what other athletes are doing. I watch how they warm up. You know, I look at their training leading into it because it's all a learning experience. And you don't get that if you go to a competition where you will always win.
Sure.
So although I've had like a lot of wins along the way, my goal has always been to like elevate, do the next step, go to the next big competition. So yeah, after the Irish Pro, I took up on going to the Ghost Clash, which was the following February, like a few months later. And I was like, everything was dialed in at that point. So yeah.
Sure. And that's what led to those lifts that you mentioned, the all-time world record squat.
Yeah.
What was your dot score, if you can remember roughly from that?
622.
622.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the pinnacle that we've reached so far.
Yeah.
Sure. And at that point, what did you feel moving forward in terms of, did you feel like there was no limit, nothing could stop you, like, or did you feel like I'm scraping the ceiling here? Like, what was the feeling?
Like I was capable of more.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was like my first really big platform, and I traveled obviously from the UK to the US for that, which, you know, makes it more difficult to travel,
Sure.
especially because I would like cut weight for that competition. So like I had, you know, I flew, had water retention, but yeah, like I went into that competition probably pretty nervous still because I was like around people I'd been watching for years, and you know, like yeah, like it's like I made mistakes on the day. So like I only got one bench because I forgot that the commands were different when I got nervous. So I like jumped the start command, which I've never had before. So I had to redo that. And then because I was nervous because I failed a lift, I failed it again because I let my bum come off the bench. So like I got one bench, I got my opener.
Sure.
I played it safe on my deadlift just because I really wanted a 600 kilo total. So I was like, just going to secure that. So I had room there. And then like I failed my last squat. I got it, but they failed me on depth. Although in reality, like, in my opinion, I did exactly the same thing as I'd done on my second. But like, so Like I was capable of more than I'd
Sure.
actually achieved on the day. But like I knew that like I still had a lot to learn, even just from a competition experience point of view. Yeah, like didn't feel like I'd hit my ceiling.
Sure. And you feel like you had a lot to learn in competitions, and that would have been what, your 10th, 11th, 12th competition, something like that you would have done?
I'm not sure actually. I'd have to look.
My point is just that.
I
at
mean,
that
you
point,
never stop learning.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you're
And
not
it's like
going to
a
do
little bit of a
3.
different environment.
Mhm.
Like you're going into a regional where you know everybody and they're people you've known for years, versus like going to a competition where the whole powerlifting community is watching,
Sure.
because this is like the competition where records are broken, and it's just a different environment. But
Sure.
I mean, you never stop learning, or you should never have the attitude that you know it all.
Sure.
Like there's always room to be better.
So then we hit that pinnacle, and then at that point, I think you've already entered the American Pro.
Yeah.
So that's already on your calendar, right? You've knocked this one out of the park. You've made a few mistakes, but on a bad day you pick 622, whatever. So you must be looking at that thinking, okay, this was a bad day and I got this. So American Pro's already in the cards.
Yeah.
Right? What's your thought process then leading up to that? And what happens that leads to the American Pro kind of not going as well?
Yeah, so I mean, I've obviously already knew I had a back injury at this point, because I actually originally hurt it in 2019.
Okay.
So I'd been struggling with it for like 3 years already.
Okay. And what did that, when you say struggling with it, on a day-to-day or week by week or even session by session level, like what does struggling with that injury look like?
Okay, so I'll just give a quick summary. So the first time I actually hurt it was, I did a deadlift session. I was tired. I've always like really prided myself on my technique first overweight, but that one time I made a mistake and I let a heavy deadlift rebound, and it like instantly injured me. At the time, I thought I'd just caused some disc damage, because I basically like I couldn't even stand. I had to like get help to get home. And then like the next day when I got up, I literally couldn't even use my legs. You had to carry me to the hospital. And I just got sent home with painkillers. Like they did an x-ray at the time, but it was overlooked. What I'd actually done was cause a hairline fracture of one of my vertebrae, and the disc below that had ruptured. And so at that point in time, this is in 2019, we just rehabbed me for disc damage. And like my training was all, super low load. We did a lot of core work, a lot of like decompressive stuff, so like pull-ups, dips. We worked back up to doing things like suitcase carries, longitudinal trap bar carries. Like everything was around like core work, balancing everything back out. So that actually really worked well. And when I got back to lifting, it was all like front loaded squats, and everything was like tailored towards just gradually going back to lifting. So we'd done everything right and I felt good. But during the 2019 and 2022, I had like a few, I would just call them setbacks, where basically my back would go again. And like I wouldn't even be able to dress myself. Like it would take me like a week just to walk again. And like I saw so many specialists during this time, and everyone was just like, oh no major damage, you just need to stop lifting. As long as you keep pushing your body like this, you'll be in pain. So I think I basically had just this like standard level of pain all the time, and then it would sometimes get worse. But it could just be like I twisted slightly funny to put my seatbelt on in the car, and then it would go, and then it would take me like a month to get back to like a normal, like I guess I say normal, like it had become my normal level of pain that I could handle and I could move properly. Therefore, I could train again. So yeah, I was like just encouraged not to compete at a high level if I didn't want to be in pain, but that if I carried on, there wasn't like any major damage and I wouldn't make it any worse.
Sure. So I mean, you're competing at the Ghost Clash with this ruptured disc damage, right? So how are you squatting nearly 4 times body weight with all of this going on? What's going on in the background to facilitate that?
Yeah. So really, I honestly don't even know how I was capable, because to peak for that competition, I could only train every 5 days because my back would be so stiff and sore that I wouldn't be able to train again for 5 days. So it was like intense train, 4 days off, intense train, 4 days off. So I'd basically like changed all my training to fit around my back injury, where in reality, if I'd known what I'd done at the time, I would have given it the time to heal. But in my head, I was just like, as long as I keep pushing it, I'm just going to be in pain. So this is just something you deal with. But then after the Ghost Clash, it started to affect my hips. It was like it had gone past the point of like, I knew I had some nerve damage, and but it was all stuff that I could still sort of handle. And again, like I was just told, this is just because you're pushing yourself to like another level. So I like was still training and like to compete at the American Pro. You say, you know, I didn't do well. I still came 4th overall.
Oh yeah,
but like
relative standard. I'm sorry.
My
yes.
training for it was like really like not ideal, and I should have known at that point that there was like something really wrong. So I did not enjoy that competition. Like I didn't enjoy the training for it. I just got to the point where I was just in too much pain. But despite that, I was still capable of achieving like a lot physically. It just took its toll on me mentally as well.
Sure. So when you say it started to present in your hips and stuff, so we've gone from just maybe having lower back pain or being stiff in your back, and when you say it starts to now spread, what does that look like whilst you're prepping for the American Pro? Like what symptoms are creeping in?
So like I had a lot of hip pain. Ended up like tying off my hips with like bands and stuff,
Like
just
compression.
to
bands,
compression because it was that painful. Just to keep going. But it did get to the point where like I had nerve damage that even when I sat down, like my body would shake. If you actually look back at the videos from that competition, I like would shake when I came back up from the squat, and I would need to do it quick enough that I could like get it off my back.
Because you'd just be trembling.
Yeah. So like the nerve damage had started to present a lot more. Like I couldn't stand on one leg. I don't know how. Honestly, like it sounds crazy to even reflect on and talk back, because like it just became my normal. Like that was just something I was told, this is what you put up with if you want to do it. So like I loved it so much that I was just like, oh, I could just deal with it. But I probably should have known that this is not normal.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing at that point, but would it be fair to say that kind of in that period leading up to the Ghost Clash then and the American Pro, that, you know, when you're you're doing what you can to train, and almost all the time outside of that is just being done to get you better so you can do another session.
Yeah, basically.
So it's just kind of this vicious cycle where you're just kind of teetering on the edge.
Yeah.
The whole time.
It does make me think, if I didn't have that and I dealt with it years earlier, if I'd known what I'd done, what would I have been capable of? Because, you know, but I guess I'm going to find that out, because like I have took the time to heal now, and I've built like a better foundation. Like I know I'm in good condition, and I've like, I mean, touch wood, I've not had back pain now in like 8 months.
Yeah.
Like,
which is a big deal when it's your norm day to day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. So American Pro comes and goes. Things have escalated to a pretty severe point. At that point, you scrape through the American Pro. So what happens after this? Because after this is when you finally say enough's enough.
Yeah.
Something needs to change here. So what happens to get you to that point? Because, you know, if you're willing to suffer like that for the American Pro, there's got to be something pretty bad that makes you just go, no.
Yeah.
No more.
I mean, it started to affect just my everyday life. Like, no, like I was shaking just sitting down and getting up, and you know, I couldn't like even pick up the dogs properly. And
we have miniature Dachshunds for the record. So
they're only little.
They're pretty light.
Yeah, like it just didn't feel worth it anymore. But like I didn't want to give up lifting. And like in my head, that's, you know, that's what I'd been told. So I actually like had pushed getting more imaging done. So I had some MRIs done again. And then we actually came out here for the Swiss symposium at that point, and I went to Brian Carroll's talk, and he actually went through his back injury and he put his MRIs up on the screen, and I was like, that's what mine looks like. And I was like, what? And he was talking about like what a devastating back injury, and he'd been told that he'd been in pain, he was going to be in pain for his whole life and he would never lift again. But then he talked through how he actually rehabbed himself back out of that with the help of Stuart McGill. So after his talk, I went and found him and I was like, I
We
have
need
the
to have a
same injury.
conversation. Yeah.
Like, and basically he is the only one that had ever come back from that severe of an injury to compete again. And so he was like, you're probably never going to compete again. So I was like, oh, but you did it. So if you did it, then it's definitely possible. And he'd done the same thing to a couple of his discs and vertebra, whereas for me, it was just one.
Sure.
So people know, what had happened was, what had probably originally started as like a hairline fracture over time had broken down that vertebra above, and the disc nucleus below had burst up into the bone. So I basically just had this like big cavity in that vertebra that like the disc had like filled into. So the disc below couldn't function properly. And so like I was just vulnerable constantly. Any movement, the disc wasn't doing its job. That vertebra wasn't stable because it had mostly disintegrated. So there's obviously like nothing that they can do surgically. It's just let it heal.
Sure.
So
how did it feel then? Obviously you go to, and I mean this in no disrespectful way, but you go to medical practitioners or whatever who don't love the sport like you do. They're not involved in it.
yeah.
And they say, don't lift. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, the advice I was given was just like, you'll never lift again
Mhm.
and you need to stop now so it can heal. And then I would like question that and say, okay, well, how long do I have to let it heal? What does that look like? So I actually did, I sought out help from Brian, not long after that, just because like he was the only person that had actually managed to come back from this injury. So I was like, I just want to know what you did. How can I apply that to myself? Because I don't want to be in pain for the rest of my life. And I want to lift, even if I don't compete. Like, I love training. It's like a big, and at that point, it becomes such a big part of my identity. I felt a little bit lost without it.
True.
So yeah, I was just like determined that if he could do it, then I could do it.
Did it hit differently when even he said there was a chance that you might not come back?
Yeah,
being
because
someone who's actually understands what it means to you.
yes, but like I just always knew that I would do absolutely everything that I could to get back.
Okay.
So I think you can't go into any injury with a defeatist mindset. You have to be positive, and you have to know that you will do everything you can to get out of that.
So what does that start? So the process starts, right? You
Yeah.
accept that you have to bite the bullet and stop training, which everyone can probably relate who's listened to this sucks. And you're dealing with the fact that maybe a huge part of your identity is perhaps never going to come back.
Yeah.
So where do you start there? What's the both mentally and physically?
Yeah, so I actually took 7 months out of the gym completely, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you've been training for over 10 years at that point, and it had like, I never missed a training session. I was in the gym. It was also my job, so I was in the gym constantly. So I actually had to stop coaching people in person because I physically couldn't even pick up a like 5-pound plate.
Sure.
So like the first part of recovery was just everything was super regimented, sitting, walking, lying, like standing. I couldn't sit for too long. I couldn't lie for too long. I had my back bound up to keep it straight. So obviously like it was my lower back. So L5S1. So yeah, like I couldn't even like pick things up. I couldn't bend over. So like my back was just completely straight for like 7 months. So like I had grabbers all over the house, and like I couldn't walk the dogs on my own. I couldn't drive because we like it's not automatic in the UK. Well, you can, but both our cars were gears, and I like physically couldn't even do
stick shift. You couldn't do.
Yeah. So like I basically was like super limited, so I couldn't go anywhere. Like even just regimenting how long you lie down to sleep for, like everything was timed. So it was like putting regimented schedule to all the things that you don't usually think about, which was tough. But like having been someone that's done that for, lifting, eating, supplementation. Like, it didn't feel too abnormal. It was just applying it to stuff that you usually take for granted.
Sure. So it was almost some kind of really strange workout program.
Yeah.
For you.
And like going into it knowing that like this might not work, but you have to try, and you have to, I like went into it being like, I'm going to do absolutely everything I'm told. I'm going to do everything down to the T. Like, I don't want to leave anything to chance.
Sure. And what your mindset at that point, there are obviously probably the odd days where you don't feel quite so positive.
Oh no. Like, I mean, I'm human after all. It was hard, like not even just not being able to go anywhere. Like, I missed training with our crew that we had. At that point we'd actually opened up our own gym space. So I basically just didn't go there for the first few months because I started just going to hang out and like, encourage other people. But it was too difficult watching everybody else get to lift. And,
True.
Everybody like complains about like what they're doing and like, oh, this is so hard. And I'd be like, at least you could do it.
Yeah.
But I was like, this is mentally not good for me to be around that. So I actually just selfishly took a step back and just didn't go to the gym for a few months. And I like obviously had to fill that time with other things. So like rather than moping and being like, oh, I can't do this, I just focused on things I could do instead. So I just like did some more educational stuff for coaching, like a lot more online courses, and I picked up video gaming again. And like there were lots of other things that I used my time for rather than letting it go to waste. So I think the most important thing is just like focusing on what you can control and what you can do. And I just not focusing on the stuff that you can't.
So speaking as someone who has gone through this process, obviously that's stage one, which we can probably all argue is the hardest one.
Yeah, I thought that too.
Okay.
And I was
good.
like in it thinking, oh, this is like the hardest part because I can't even train. But like every stage I've got to, like first going back to the gym. Okay, this isn't too bad. I'm really limited. I started by training once a week. It was like push-ups, pull-ups, TRX rows, like really simple stuff. And we added in some like dumbbell floor presses. And then like, I mean, this is like 7 months after I'd stopped lifting. And then like another month later, I started doing like some bodyweight squats, some suitcase carries. And then at that point, I think I started training like twice a week. But it was like super limited. Like I'd been used to training really hard. And so I was like coming in just like, but I knew that like, it's the bare minimum, but this is all I need to slowly increase what I'm doing. Because at this point, like my spine is not fully healed. The disc has settled back down to where it should be, but the bone is still healing. And so actually part of that process of like loading the spine, just a little bit of stress and then giving it like a week to recover. That was still in my, like I had to see it as it's still part of the healing process. This is not normal training. I'm still just healing.
And during like that first stage where you're doing no training and the beginning of that second stage then where you're starting to do something, what is it like day to day compared to the worst part, say, after the American Pro?
So I still was in some pain. There were like a couple of setbacks actually along the way in that first part where we traveled and we did like a long flight. That's obviously super awkward because you like, I don't usually sit for a whole flight anyway. I get up, but there's not a lot of space on flights to do that. So we traveled to see some family and we actually went and saw Brian in person and he like got me doing some lifting and that set me back. I think it was just like too much too soon. So like that was a setback that basically I had to go back to the beginning and almost start over. So like that was physically and mentally challenging. But like any lifting I did, I wasn't in pain when I was doing it. And like everything I was doing was just around like keeping the pain as low as possible. So like even just regimenting, walking, how long I sleep for, how long I sit for, like that was all still in place. I just added in like another layer of like some light training. I think personally, like the hardest point is when you actually start to like set expectations. And when I got back to a point of like, now I'm lifting properly again, this is like a year later. And I'd set myself the task of competing at the Ghost Clash. And everyone told me that it was a mistake and that I wouldn't be able to handle it because I was not going to be where I was. You know, I'm going to like this big pro competition, basically knowingly coming in last. But I was okay with that because I knew it was just like a part of the process, and I didn't want to wait to compete again until I was my best. Like, it's still a learning opportunity.
True.
Being back in that environment and reminding myself why I did it. But the training for it was mentally really challenging because I still had nerve damage. I would shake while I was squatting. I actually still couldn't deadlift from the floor until like 2 weeks out. So I was like gradually working it down on a block. And there was like part of me that was like, I may just have to go and do a token deadlift because I don't know if I'm going to be capable of it at that point. So I think it's just like I set myself like a deadline, but it wasn't like a definitive deadline. It was just a stepping stone in the process of getting better. But we also moved here in that like stage of training. So like I went from being around the crew I was familiar with to being around people that, you know, didn't know me so well. They didn't know how I lifted before, or, you know, like, and I was like, my training did not look good. Like everything looked a bit messy still. I had like a twist in a lot of my lifts still. Like my body was just still not in the best place, but I was just doing what I could at that point. So yeah, I think that, to be honest, like that was probably the most challenging phase.
Sure, because you're at diminished capacity.
Yeah.
You're in a new place with new people who maybe don't know your story or whatever, and you're entering this competition that was previously such a successful, you know,
I think
event
everybody
for
had
you.
these like expectations that I was like going to go in and maybe win again, and like I knew that that wasn't going to be the case. But like, I think to me, like that was hard, but like it only really mattered to me what I did, and like I knew what I had expectations for myself. But yeah, also I think just the pressure of moving here, like there's such a good opportunity. Like it's something I dreamed of, like coming here to train, and I came here to train when I was literally at my worst I had been in like 7 years.
And during that Ghost Clash prep, you mentioned not being able to deadlift from the floor.
Yeah.
But what else was compromised in terms of like frequency and stuff like that?
I was still only training like twice a week.
Okay.
I like had to I was basically doing the bare minimum. I could not really handle any volume, so I would come in and work up to like a semi-heavy squat just for a single, and then that would be it. I'd go do like one accessory and then I'd have to leave. Like my training was so basic. It was like the bare minimum, but it was like at that point I was still healing. It was just part of my healing process. I was trying to get my body used to lifting again. So like I wasn't capable of more, and I definitely didn't want to overdo it to then end up taking a big step back.
True.
So it was like I had spent years like really pushing myself, and then for like the first 8 months of training I was like holding back. Like I had to hold myself back because I knew that I couldn't push it because I would push it too hard.
And
So
I'm sure
it's like
being here, in this gym where you've got every toy imaginable around everyone else maxing out every weekend or whatever, that must have been very
it was
difficult.
hard. Like I knew that like I could only do like 1 or 2 things at a time, and I couldn't do them very well, but like I was just patient, and I knew that if I did this stage properly, it would allow me to be able to go back to lifting. So I was like out of pain at that point pretty much most of the time. I would say it was only like, I don't know, since I stopped lifting, maybe 15 months later, where I was actually training normally again.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's hard to know because, like I said, Brian was the only person that, before me, actually healed from it and been able to lift again. So there was like this possibility that I would never be able to get back to where I was. So that was tough mentally.
Is that still playing on your mind at that point, that you may never get back to even 90% of what you were?
I mean, even when I did the Ghost Clash last year, yeah, I still was like, I don't know, but I'm just going to do everything I can to try to get there. By the summer, I was like actually be even able to push myself in training, and I was like, okay, I can do this. It's just that my starting point is quite a bit further back. And obviously, like, I could still compare my lifts to like what they were before. And like, it's tough because I'm like, I was capable of more than this like 6 years ago, even as a lighter lifter. But yeah, I have just been focusing on just doing a bit better, because that's the mindset I had the first time before I like reached my pinnacle, I guess. And so I've just adopted that same mindset again. It's just a setback. But yeah, it was a much longer setback than I thought, because you watch other top athletes go through injuries. They had their bicep reattached and they're lifting 6 months later at the same level. Like, it's took me like 2 years, which,
And how did the Ghost Clash go? Like, what did you manage to lift and achieve at the Ghost Clash, and how do you feel about what you did there, both in terms of maybe what you managed physically, but also just the mental capacity to go back to that place with, the best in the world around you and say, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm going to do.
So like, I think I prepared myself pretty well for it before mentally. It was a lot harder than I thought it would be because I was put in the like pro flight, which was great because I was around lifters that I knew really well, but like some of them weren't very nice to me. Like I had things said to me like, why are you in this flight? I had people making fun of my deadlift because it was so much lower than a lot of the other women, but like that was the one lift that I'd really not
Hadn't
pulled
really
back.
come back
But
yet.
I still deadlifted like 400 pounds. I squatted 455 and benched like 270, I think. So like they're still good numbers, but I did that also at a much heavier body weight.
True.
You can imagine that, like, not being able to move much or train for a year, like I put on like a lot of size and it wasn't good size either. So like I wasn't going to be cutting weight. I was like physically not in the best place, but my focus was getting my back better. Now I'm like back to the weight I used to be, but it's, I've spent most of this year improving my body composition to where I could push it. So I competed at North of the Border in November, and like I feel like now I'm starting to get back to numbers that I was doing previously.
Before we talk about North of the Border, Ghost Clash comes and goes.
Yeah.
And you survive.
Yeah.
Well, you don't fracture your back again.
Well, that was the biggest goal, going into it, coming out of it pain-free. Like that was the first time I did all 3 lifts on one day, pushed them all on one day. And then I woke up the next day and I had 0 pain. So like I did what I needed to do. Like I proved to myself that I could get back on platform, push my lifts, albeit not at the same standard that I'd been when I was at my best, but it's that's a big step towards it. So I feel like I'd at that point already achieved like a big milestone, actually being able to compete and being pain-free.
So did that kind of just show you like this is doable?
Yes. Yeah. Like on that day I was like, okay, this is like, it's only up from here.
True.
But it's just being patient and making sure that I build a better foundation so it doesn't happen again. And like being patient with that. And like I said, kind of looking at it from a mindset of how did I get there in the first place? I was just hyper focused on just making a little progress at a time, because we all know in any sport that it's about longevity and like consistency. You don't become great overnight. It's years of work. So.
Okay, so Ghost Clash comes and goes. You realize I can handle competing. I'm back in the capacity of competing. So North of the Border kind of gets put on the calendar then later in the year, and your training starts to become more normal, should we say. So first off, how does that feel, being able to do a prep? Because what you did for the Ghost Clash, anyone who would look at that would say that's not a prep, that's crawling towards a competition, right? So how much did you appreciate being able to prep for a competition?
Well, I actually was able to go in and do like a proper, so like historically I've always done more like bodybuilding style training in my off season, so that lined up well anyway, because I'd lost a lot of size off my lower body in that year off, because I'd kind of started upper body training. I'd managed to maintain some of my upper body size, and I'd mostly lost lower body like muscle mass off my legs. So that was like the big goal, was like build that back, but also decrease the amount of fat I was carrying because I'd put quite a lot of weight on. So I'd gone all the way up to like 82 kilos at my heaviest, and I compete at 67.5. Normally that was where I was like comfortable sitting. So like I had a lot of work to do just from a body composition point of view, but like actually being able to do that training and really push myself just felt amazing. And I was like loving training again. I'm actually like really fortunate in that I have Jacob here as a training partner. He's 20, so he's young, so he like can push himself hard. So like we fit really well together. Like we at that point in time we're like a similar strength, so like we can compete against each other. But just like having someone to like push me to compete against, and like being able to do like a proper off-season training just like was incredible. Yeah.
And do you think, on the back of this now, where you're at, do you think that you probably have an appreciation for it perhaps that you wouldn't have ever had if you just kept going up and up and up and climbing the ladder?
I mean, absolutely. Like it's made me really grateful just to be able to train. It's made me like see it in a different point of view. I mean, even just that year off, not being able to train at all, it kind of made me reevaluate my whole life. Like I'd centered everything around competing so much. I'd sacrificed a lot. I'd lost, close relationships with family members. Like I'd kind of prioritized it so much that actually taking time away made me really reevaluate, but also made me realize why I do it in the first place. I think so. Like I used it as an opportunity to like just reevaluate everything, question why I do it, and I think now I have a much better balance because of that time. I can still push my training really hard. I can still prioritize competing, but it's like coming in phases. Like I've made room in my life for a lot more like other hobbies, spending time with people that I maybe wouldn't have done before. So in a way, like I utilized it as an opportunity to really reevaluate and kind of change things for the better.
True. I mean, you're obviously in the midst of that change right now, but from what you've experienced so far, do you think that should we say less all-in, less hardcore, inverted commas, attitude and having a bit more balance could actually be the path to the best outcome athletically in the long term?
I mean, I think I look at it from more of a longevity point of view now, too. Like, we only get one body, so I want to make sure I look after it because I don't want to go through something like that again. And I still want to be using my body and, like, be strong, like, when I'm older. Like I don't want to be like, I still want to push the powerlifting. And I think you can still achieve with the mindset of also having longevity. Like, I think there is a balance, and I feel like I'm going to prove that myself because now I have a much better balance, and, I'm doing things at a better pace so that my body can handle it better.
True. So prepping for North of the Border and then the competition itself, how does that go?
Yeah, so I spent like the summer last year just like working so hard. But like we also traveled a lot. So like we made space for other things, but like, so it's still a priority. It's just, I just feel like now I have a much better balance. But yeah, like I was actually able to like really push my training hard again. And I think because I took so much time off, I could almost like push it to a whole nother level and I also appreciated it so much more. So I didn't take a second of it for granted. Like if something got hard, I'd be like, well, I actually get to do this now. I was told by so many people that I would never do this again. I get to do it. So like, I feel like that's actually given me like a whole new appreciation for it so that I actually push my training much more than I did before. Because
now it's something you get to do rather than something that you have to do, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I never took it for, maybe I did take it for granted. I feel like I just had done it for so long and I was just, like having it taken away and maybe never get it back. Now I get to do, like, I feel like I look at it from a whole different point of view.
Sure. And I ask this now knowing the answer, but everyone needs to know what happened at North of the Border. You've had this great prep where you can finally train at full capacity, or at least very near to full capacity. So you're like, boom, this is go time again. So what happens there?
So I think I had the best training prep I've had for any competition ever. Like it went so smooth. I'd utilized everything I've learned in the last 10 years of competing and put that into practice. So yeah, I went into that meet just being like, I'm so prepared to like just have the best day. But there was also like less pressure. Like I saw it as a stepping stone. It wasn't like a big pro meet, and I was doing it with everyone from the gym. So it kind of had like a bit of a different mindset, but like I still had those goals of like, I want to break the raw in sleeves all-time world record. Like I'm capable of it. But I tore my quad on my first attempt squat. So I'd actually done like a small water cut for that competition, and I got sick the day before when I was like refeeding, and I just went into it still dehydrated. So I know I like felt good on the day though. Like I was warming up, everything was moving really good. I was like, today I'm going to squat 500 pounds. Like this is the day. And then I just shifted slightly on my first squat and like shifted onto my right, and I tore the outer part of my right quad. And like, I was like, oh no. Like I had the best breath, and I like walked off the platform and I was like, okay, like this is not worth, like I like basically couldn't even stand on that leg. And everyone was like, just miss your second attempt, put 500 pounds on and go for it on your third. And I was like, you know what, it's not worth the like long term. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, I spent so long getting back to this point, like getting my back good, that I don't want another setback of like a major injury. Like I knew it was minor. Mm-hmm.
There are like so many people probably listening to this now who know the curse of the perfect meat prep. Yeah. It's almost like destined that if it's too good, something bad has to happen. I don't know though.
I feel like it was only the perfect prep because I'd learned so much. Mm-hmm. And like I was like almost going into it fresh because I'd had so much time off. So I just think it's one of those things, like we put ourselves at risk. Like you're pushing your body to the absolute maximum. Like there is risk in that, and I know that. And so like, yeah, like I knew I'd torn my quad, and I was like, okay. So I went, and there was actually a lady there doing like some physio. So I just went to see her to see how bad it was. She like did some needling, and she was like, just keep moving it, keep walking. And I was like, probably should have been upset, but my mindset was like, this could have been much worse. This is just going to be minor. It's probably just going to be a few weeks. Like, it's okay. Like, and it also doesn't undo everything I did to get to this point. It's a very minor setback, but maybe that's because I had such a big one with my back. It felt like, so I think things feel bad if you've got something else, like, unless you've got something else much worse to compare them to. I was just like, I just saw it as it is what it is. Like it doesn't undo everything I've got to get to this point. And even if I don't finish the day, it is what it is. It's one competition.
So do you think Naomi, who doesn't break her back, handles that situation nearly as well?
Mentally, I'm much stronger now because of that period of time. So maybe 2 years before, I probably would have thrown my toys out the pram and been upset and maybe cried, and but I think now I can deal with it better because I can sort of look at the bigger picture and go, okay, this, it could have been what I could have completely tore the muscle off the tendon or the bone. Like it was a minor tear. And like, obviously having you there on the day, like, that was like a big reassurance because you've always got my back. So maybe it would have been different if I'd been on my own. And I actually, when I was getting needling done by this lady, Dave was there at the competition with us all, and he came over and was like, I think he was expecting me to be like devastated. But I was like really calm, and he was just like, your back is good. That's what you need to focus on. And I was like, yeah, like my back is good. It's not hurt in months. Like I'm still capable of like big numbers at this point. Maybe I just don't get to put them up today, but like, that's okay. Like this was just one competition along my way. It's not, I think I can appreciate competitions a lot more now because I'm able to almost do them again. And I thought I would never. So yeah, I actually did actually finish the day. I went on a bench and deadlifted. So I was just like, I might as well try. I'm here. Like if I, I'll warm up and see how it feels. If it hurts and I feel like it's going to get worse, I'll back out. I wasn't like, I have to do it. It was just like, if I can, I will. And I actually ended up benching 300 pounds.
Which is a PR.
It was a competition PR.
Yeah.
And then with deadlift, obviously that's a bit more awkward. I just twisted out my feet a little bit more. So I adjusted. I knew I would lift a bit less, but I was like, I might as well put up a total while I'm here, as long as I'm not going to make the injury any worse. So yeah, I
And what did you manage to deadlift with a torn quad?
I think like 445.
Like 200 kilos, give or take.
Yeah.
Yeah. So overall, not a bad day.
No, I mean,
considering.
I was capable of more had I not done that, but like that capability has not disappeared. I just didn't get to put it to full show that day.
Because most people would presume that scenario. You've had this huge setback, right? This huge build back period, and then the Ghost Clash second time round is a little baby stepping stone. It's not a token competition, but you get my point.
Yeah.
And then North of the Border is meant to be the first comp where you're like, here I am.
Yeah.
This is me, and this happens. Like most people would see that as like that's going to devastate you for some time to come, perhaps. But instead, it kind of to say it washed off you maybe is too light, but.
I know. I mean, I if anything, like I'm proud of the way that I dealt with that. And I think had it been 2 years prior, I would not have been so calm and been more upset. And, because I only compete once or twice a year. That is the only opportunity to really put to show what I've done. But I was also appreciative of just being there. I was appreciative of actually just being able to lift, and I had zero back pain. So I was just looking at it from a different point of view, which I think, there's not many athletes that go throughout their entire career and don't have a single injury. Like you are pushing your body to its absolute physical maximum capability. So like you might push that too far. Sometimes like freak accidents happen. Like we all know that there's risk by like I have an all-time world record, so I am pushing the ceiling of like what's capable. So like you can't expect there to be no risk with that. So I've accepted that, but I'm also now like I've learned so much more. I've put everything I've learned over the last 14 years of lifting into practice, the last 10 years of competing. And I also have like looking at it from a longevity point of view, like I know my body much better now than I ever have. So like I know better when to like push and when to pull back. But yeah, I also knew that I was going to be competing again like a few months later at the Cincinnati Pro-Am, and like
which we're 7-ish weeks out from now, right?
Just under 7 weeks out. So like I knew that I would be okay and I'd be able to put what I'd worked for up at this next competition.
True. So what did rehab in the torn quad look like? Because that probably was a walk in the park by comparison.
Yeah, I mean, it took about 6 weeks.
Okay.
I used like BPC 157 and TB 500. I was injecting those into my leg every day to help with the recovery process. But I was like training like blood flow restriction. Like I was basically just doing all the the right things that I could. And then I still carried on training my upper body in a way that was possible. And then just like giving it time to heal. And I was like getting work done on it regularly, because obviously like when you have muscular tear, everything around it will tighten up as almost like a protective mechanism. So my quad was like super restricted and tight. So a lot of it was just like stretching that back out and like having work done on it. But yeah, like I've had like zero pain in that quad for quite a few weeks now. So I've actually been able to push my training as normal.
But even though like something like a quad tear, which is pretty minor by comparison, it was still kind of an all-in attitude to healing it.
Yes, like I'm going to do everything I can to get this to heal as quick as possible.
This is kind of a common trend is what I'm trying to get at here. So as you sit here now, just under 7 weeks out from the Pro-Am, how do you feel about your powerlifting journey over the last couple of years? Obviously, we have no idea what's going to happen in terms of the perfect prep can lead to the imperfect day, as you found. But how do you feel in yourself with your career in powerlifting and your lifting compared to maybe how you did on that day winning the Ghost Clash, which would be 3 years ago now, I guess?
I mean, I've learned a lot more since that point in time. I also, I still felt like I didn't really belong in pro competitions at that point. I guess there was always a little seed of doubt, whereas now I know I'm capable of that. So I think I've got a lot more self-assurance and confidence despite the big setback. I know I can do it because I've done it before, and I know that I'm in a much stronger position with my body now than I was before, because I did all of that with a major back injury and like in constant pain. Like I don't have that anymore. Like I'm in like the best position now to achieve like whatever I'm capable of.
True. And I'm sure I speak for everyone listening to this when we sincerely hope you hit that 500-pound all-time world record sleeve squat in 6 weeks or whatever it is. So having been on the journey that you've been through, what would you say are just the key takeaways for individuals who, you know, maybe they haven't broken their back, but maybe they're going through series of constant niggly injuries or some other form of, you know, long-term struggle with their career? What would you say to them?
Okay, so like first would be that like you know your body best. You know how you feel. So if something doesn't feel right, investigate and do something about it. That like not every professional is gonna always give you the right advice. If it doesn't sit right, find different advice. Like one thing I learned is that like I could have done something about mine sooner, but like that's just part of my journey. But if that's like advice I could pass on to other people, it would be to trust your own instincts and your own body. And then 2 is to focus on what you're actually capable of doing and not what you're not capable of doing. So if you do have an injury and you have to take time out to let it heal, just focus on the things that you can do instead. Fill your time with other things. You know, powerlifting is not the only thing in your life, or it shouldn't be. Like you have other people around you. You should have other hobbies. Like, you know, actually take the time to heal and focus on the things that you can do. And then, like you want to leave nothing to doubt. Like you want to do everything that's possible to heal that injury and be in a better place for when you come back. So just really like making sure that you're leaving nothing to chance.
Sure. That second point there, I think, is really interesting, just because, you know, in your opinion, then, is there such thing as being too all in, to almost the decrement of the athlete? As in, if powerlifting or bodybuilding, whatever it might be.
Yes, because at some point you're not going to be able to compete at that level forever. So then when you stop, if you've like been too hyper focused, what are you left with?
Like, maybe you get an injury and you don't.
I mean,
you have to push through it because you don't have anything else.
Like the most important thing is in your life is the relationships of the people closest to you, your family, like your closest friends. So like they should never be sacrificed over, you know, anything, your work, your hobby, your sport. But like you should have other things going on because it's not going to be there forever. But it also gives you balance because you can't train all the time. Like you need time to recover. But like recovery to me isn't just like sitting around waiting to recover. It's like going out, moving your body in a different way, like having like positive experiences with like travel, friends, family, you know, like getting outside, doing other activities that are not super strenuous the way that weightlifting is. So I think, like it allowed me to get a better balance. So I think if I could help other people, it's just like making sure that you're like well-rounded, because I actually think that makes you a better person. It puts you in a better mindset, which is actually going to allow you to push your body better in training.
So would you say also then that, again, people for struggling with similar issues is to try and find, without sounding too corny, the positives from it, or rather what it can teach you that can make your life better after the incident?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could say that about any roadblock, because life is going to be full of them. Like, that's just life. Like, we're human beings. Like, there are going to be challenges along the way. So, like, you should always try and, like, pivot off of it and, you know, use it as an opportunity to go, okay, am I actually where I want to be? Am I doing the things I want to be doing? Am I spending time with the people I want to be spending time with? Like, it's an opportunity to really reevaluate. Like, if something is tough, there's your opportunity to go, okay, I'm going to look at everything from the big picture and then, like, pivot from that point to the direction that you want to be going in.
Perfect.
So,
very solid advice.
Yeah.
So moving forward now, past the Cincinnati Pro, do you have any future plans, or is that right now just that kind of brick
No,
wall
I mean,
that you're waiting to go through?
I'm focused on that competition because it's soon, but I always like think ahead, and I usually like plan out my year, separate competitions so I've got time to improve. So I am going to compete again in November at the Shack Showdown. It's like another big pro competition. And then at some point in the summer, I might do like a bench only, like local meet, maybe put on a slingshot and see what I can do.
Have some fun.
Yeah, like that will be more of like a fun, like I won't peak for that competition. I'm just
Cool.
slot it in my off season somewhere. But yeah, like I think there's always room to improve. Like I'm constantly learning about what could be better. Like I use my past experiences to build up from, like what worked before, okay, what could change. Like, and like I, like body composition wise, I'm in a much better place, but I can definitely still improve that too, which will in turn improve my lifts. And I'm still kind of like tinkering with technique. You know, it took me like pretty much all of last year to get to a point where I wasn't like twisting in my squat and my bench, and like those are still things I'm working on. So like, yeah, there's still like a lot going on in the background.
The work is never done.
No, I mean, even when you achieve, like, you know, the top athletes, they're like, they never stop. There's a reason why you get there in the first place, is because you're looking for like improvement. Like I said, I just always focus on like, what can I do better?
Sure.
Like I've never been someone that looks at competition and tries to beat other people, because especially in powerlifting, I feel like there's room for like, I will do the best I can do if I focus on what I can improve. It's a waste of time and energy and like mental capacity to like look at what other people are doing from a point of competition. Of course, I look at other people's training as an interest and like a learning experience, but I think no matter where you are in your powerlifting journey, it's important to just be focused on improving yourself and only that.
Very good advice. And for those now who want to track your journey moving forward to hopefully even greater heights, what's the best way to follow what you're doing?
I pretty much put all of my training on Instagram. I kind of had like a little break from it, but I've actually recently just updated it with like the last like 7 or 8 weeks of training. So like that's where I pretty much track training is. So it's Naomi.PhoenixPerformance on Instagram.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming out today. I did my best to not wear the proud husband hat and wear the neutral podcast host hat instead. So hopefully that went well. For everyone listening to this, thank you so much. You heard where you can follow Naomi's journey onto hopefully greater heights, and we'll be back with another one at some point.
Thank you for listening.
All content you see on this channel and at elitefts.com is created by, take a guess, Elite FTS. If you want to help support the content, head over to elitefts.com and pick up literally anything that you need to be able to get more jacked and strong.